For a lot of people, the King James Version holds a special place in their heart. This is for a variety of reasons, and oftentimes with translation preferences, the number of reasons why any given version is so special to people is as many as there are individuals who read it. Whether it's the perceived beauty, the sense of dignity and antiqueness, or the familiarity of a translation one can associate with the formative years of their experience of Christianity, whatever the reason people like or dislike, use or don't use the King James Version, there are a host of valid reasons to value and cherish it, as well as criticize and reject it. In this video, I'll be listing and explaining some of the problems with the King James Version. In Genesis 36:24, the King James Version reads, "And these are the children of Zibeon, both Aya and Anna. This was that Anna that found the mules in the wilderness, as he fed the asses of Zibeon his father." Where it says "found the mules" should be read as "found the hot springs." The Hebrew word is yemim. This is what's known as a hapax legomenon, which in this case means a word that occurs very rarely or only once in the Bible, and therefore is difficult to discern what the word means. At the time, the King James translators did not know how to translate yemim correctly, but as we know, the Peshitta and Vulgate agree that it should be read as hot springs. Jerome correctly observes the etymological relationship of Hebrew and the Phoenician language, saying, quote, "The word in Punic, a language allied to Hebrew, means hot springs." Yemim also bears strong resemblance to the Hebrew for the waters, mayim, so it is clear the word refers to water and not mules. In Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, the King James Version reads, "When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel." Where it says, "according to the number of the children of Israel," should be read as "according to the number of the gods." As it is clear from the Dead Sea Scrolls 4Q DTJ, the Hebrew text clearly reads "the gods," and some texts read "the sons of El." The Hebrew word is B'nai Elohim. This is a major variant between the Masoretic text and the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the King James Version is based on the Masoretic text, which the oldest copy is from around 900 AD, whereas the Dead Sea Scrolls are roughly 1,000 years older than the best Masoretic text manuscript. In 2 Kings 22:14, the King James Version reads, "So Hilkiah the priest, and Ahikam, and Achbor, and Shaphan, and Asahiah went unto Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tikvah, the son of Harhas, keeper of the wardrobe. Now she dwelt in Jerusalem in the college, and they communed with her." Where the King James Version reads "in the college," it should be read as "in the second district." The word here is namishne, from the root mishneh, meaning double, repetition, second in order. In 2 Kings 22:14, this namishne is referring to the second quarter or the second district of the city. As the Douay Bible notes correctly, it states, "the second, that is, within the second wall, the city having 3. If you have a city with a wall around its perimeter, and you divide it with 3 walls inside, you get 4 quarters. The word college comes from the Latin word collegium, which is where we get the word colleague from. Collegium is itself from collega, which literally means to read or gather together. The King James translators thought this seemed to be related to their concept of the scholarly colleagues, and in the history of Western education, there developed various degrees which was divided into quarters. The second quarter, or what we call today the secondary education, was referred to as pertaining to the college. Many early modern English translations had this same idea, and instead of simply leaving it as second quarter, they interpreted it to mean what they, in their culture, thought of as the house of doctrine or school of divinity, the college. In 2 Chronicles 33 verse 3, the King James Version reads, "For he built again the high places which Hezekiah his father had broken down, and he reared up altars for Baalim, and made groves, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served them." Where the text says groves should be read as Asherah or Asherah poles. The Hebrew word is Asherah, but the King James Version translators did not get it right by a long shot. This is because prior to the 20th century discoveries at Ras Shamra, no one knew or understood the Ugaritic or Canaanite culture, so the King James translators simply had no clue how to correctly translate this word. Now, we know that this is the female consort of the chief god of the pantheon, and was worshipped as a mediator between people and Yahweh, hence the popularity of her worship as described throughout the Bible. In Job 3:8, the King James Version reads, "Let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up their mourning." Where it says ready to raise up their mourning should be read as those who are skilled at rousing Leviathan. Everywhere else the King James Version seems to get Leviathan correct, but here they translate it as mourning for whatever reason, but the Hebrew is Leviathan. In Psalm 4 verse 1, the King James Version reads, "Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer." Where it reads, "Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress," it should be read as, "You have relieved me when I was in distress," or freed me from distress. The Hebrew word is hiravta, from rahav, meaning wide. Poetically, it can mean to be in a wide, open pasture, but in the context, if this were taken literally, then David is saying that God made him fatter and taller, so hiravta means to make room for something or set it at liberty. In this case, it means to deliver, relieve, set free, or give room. The next verse is Psalm 12:7. This is one of the most commonly cited verses by KJV onlyists to support their views. They use this verse to argue that God has preserved the Bible in the form of the King James Version. But as it turns out, and as is often the case with many verses people like to use to support their opinions, this verse is mistranslated. Psalm 12:6-7 in the King James Version states, "The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord, thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever." Now, where the King James Version says, "Thou shalt preserve them," it should be read as, "You will guard us." KJV onlyists debate this, but here are the facts. The Hebrew word is titzreinu, and if it were in the third person, then it would be titzreim. Now normally, this might be assumed to mean him because of the energetic noon particle at the end, but given the context, anyone who knows their Hebrew knows that this is a first-person plural us. While the energetic noon makes it appear to be him, second-person singular, when nu follows noon, together we know this is the suffix for first-person plural, us. So this is tricky and is easy to see how an honest mistake could be made here, and it's somewhat like the difference between in and in. In fact, the NASB makes this same error, saying him instead of us. By the way, you can even see the third-person plural in the previous verb, tishmareim. Again, the Septuagint and the Vulgate confirms this first-person plural reading, saying, "You will keep us." For Psalm 91 verse 1, the King James Version reads, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." This verse should instead read as, "You who live in the shelter of Elyon will abide in the shadow of Shaddai." The Hebrew word being translated as secret place is seter, meaning covering, shelter, or hiding. It comes from the root satar, meaning hide, conceal, close, or secrete. Secret place is overly literal and follows what we call the genetic fallacy. To use an example in English, saying that seter means secret place would be like saying shield troop instead of shelter, since shelter etymologically stems from Old English shield and truma, meaning shield and troop, respectively. If someone were to translate the English word shelter, they would not render it as the word for shield and the word for troop in their language. Rather, the proper translation would be whatever their equivalent is for a covering, refuge, or haven. In addition, Almighty should be Shaddai. Shaddai does not mean Almighty, but refers to mountains or wilderness, and was a Canaanite epithet for El. In Proverbs 21 verse 4, the KJV reads, "An high look and a proud heart, and the plowing of the wicked is sin," where it says plowing should be read as lamp. The Hebrew word is ner, which means lamp or light source. This is very similar to the word nir, which means to break up, and comes from the root that literally means freshly tilled land. Notice the difference between the presence or absence of the yod. There's also the fact that vowel markers weren't originally in Hebrew, and this is where understanding that comes in handy. The KJV translators correctly identify this as lamp elsewhere, as in Exodus 25:37, where it reads nerotecha. The next verse is Job 17 verse 6, where the King James reads, "He hath made me also a byword of the people, and aforetime I was a tabret." Where it says aforetime I was a tabret should be read as, "and I am one before whom people spit." The King James Version translators took panim, which means face, as the concept of being before, as in the phrase "I stand before you," that is to say, in front of your face. They also confused tofet with tof, and if you still had doubts in the cognate languages, Jewish, Aramaic, Ugaritic, Arabic, etc., it means spit. The next verse is Isaiah 13:15, where the King James Version reads, "Every one that is found shall be thrust through, and every one that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword." Where it reads, "Every one that is joined unto them," should read as, "Every one that is come upon or seized shall fall by the sword." The Hebrew is ha-nisfeh, from the root safa, meaning to sweep up, snatch away, seize, capture, or consume. In Daniel 3:25, the King James Version reads, "He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." Where it says the Son of God should be read as a son of the gods. This is a similar problem as with Deuteronomy 32:8, except this time it's not a manuscript variant. The King James translators just rendered it incorrectly so as to make it look like Jesus was in the text. Daniel is in Aramaic rather than Hebrew, and the word here is labar elachin, meaning a son of the gods. The next verse is Habakkuk 1:1, where the King James Version reads, "The burden which Habakkuk the prophet did see." Where it says burden, it should be read as oracle. The Hebrew is nasa, normally meaning to bear or lift up, but in this case it means to bear the prophecy, as in an oracle. This is, again, one of those words where you have to understand the broader cultural context so you don't end up translating something too literally. Oracle itself comes from a Latin word meaning to plead or beg, but it doesn't necessarily mean begging, as we very well know, which today the word oracle is used to mean something communicated from a divine being. Turning now to the New Testament, in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, the KJV reads, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem." Now the word translated as wise men comes from the Greek magoi, which does not mean wise men, but rather means astrologers, sorcerers, or magicians. To say wise men is unacceptably vague and intentionally attempts to detract from the sense that these men were involved in magic. The next verse is in Matthew 23:24, where the KJV reads, "Ye blind guides which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel." Where it says strain at, it should read strain out. The Greek word is dilizontes, meaning to pour through a filter or strain out. The phrase strain at implies struggling with a gnat rather than trying to filter it out. The next verse is in Mark 6:20, where the KJV reads, "For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just man and unholy, and observed him, and when he heard him he did many things, and heard him gladly." Where it says observed, it should be protected. The Greek word is synetere from syntereo, meaning to preserve, keep, protect, or defend. In Luke 1:28, the KJV reads, "And the angel came in unto her, and said, Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee, blessed art thou among women." Where it says, "Thou that art highly favored," it should read, "You who have been filled with grace." The Greek word is kakaritomene, which means to be made acceptable. Funny enough, this same verb is translated correctly in Ephesians 1:6, where it translates as to be made acceptable or endow with his quality of grace. But for reasons of Protestant theological slant and their disdain for Mary, they rendered the verse in such a way that would not lead the reader to think that Mary was made to be in a state of grace, that is, made acceptable before God. The next verse is Luke 2:14, where the KJV reads, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." Where it states goodwill toward men, it should read, "Peace among people with whom he is pleased." The Greek word of note is eudokias, the genitive singular feminine of eudokia. If it were goodwill toward men, then eudokia would be in the dative form. The meaning of this part of the verse is such that God is pleased with men of goodwill. It's not God granting goodwill toward them. In 1 Corinthians 1:18, the KJV reads, "For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved, it is the power of God." Where the text says, "are saved," it should be "are being saved." The Greek word is sozomenos, which is not in the past, but is the present passive participle of sozo. The next verse is Romans 15:16, where the KJV says, "That I should be the minister of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles, ministering the gospel of God, that the offering up of the Gentiles might be acceptable, being sanctified by the Holy Ghost." Where the text says ministering the gospel of God, it should say serving the gospel of God as a priest. The Greek word is hierorgonta, from hierorgeo, which means to do in the manner of a priest, sanctify, perform offerings. If it were ministering, then the Greek word here would be diakoneo, which means to serve, attend, render ministering offices. In 1 Peter 2:2, the KJV reads, "As newborn babes desire the sincere milk of the word, that ye may grow thereby." Where it says the sincere milk of the word, it should say long for the pure spiritual milk or rational milk. I covered this with the NASB errors, but again, the Greek word is from logikos, meaning rational spiritual. It is not logon, meaning word or speech. The next verse is Hebrews 10, verse 23, where the KJV reads, "Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised." Where it says profession of our faith, it should read profession of our hope. The Greek word here is elpidos, meaning hope. The word for faith is pistis. There are many other criticisms of the KJV that I could mention. Most of those critiques are based around one's opinion of the authenticity and value of the Textus Receptus. That is an argument for another time though, and I believe I have provided enough evidence in this video for there being multiple translation errors in the KJV.